Hey cats, it's Ed Budson here. Today with a midsole of massive proportions for review. The brand spanking new ASICS GEL Nimbus 25. Will this one send me out the stratosphere or leave me feeling grounded? A little bit like the rocket that they launched from Cornwall the other day. Let's dive into this Flight Foam Blast Plus cushion monster. Welcome to the channel, people. Thanks for tuning in. It's always appreciated. If it's your first time here, you could think about subscribing and tinkling the bell of notifications. It helps the channel out a whole load as well if you give this video a thumbs up like and share it with your running buddies. Dankeschön. A shoe today that's been fired over to me by ASICS themselves for me to probe and prod. They're not throwing any Earth credits my way though, so I'm going to be very honest as I usually am. This version of the Gel Nimbus 25 is in the Island Blue and Sun Peach flavour, so you can imitate Leonardo DiCaprio or perhaps even Chuck Nolan himself. I hope you know who that is. Google it now. Right, so I've got approximately 44mm of stack height here in the Gel Nimbus 25 in the heel. I have measured it from inside the shoe using special apparatus, yeah, you know what I mean. Got about 36mm in the forefoot, making for an 8mm drop. So do remember that with these midsoles, the stack tends to scale with the size of the shoe. It'd be kind of weird if it didn't, if you think about it, because you'd end up with, you know, the same stack. Yeah, it is just not like that, guys, alright? It scales with the shoe size. I haven't measured it on the outside here, okay? That's not what I've done. That's what I've got, 44mm underfoot in the heel. Like it or not, okay? So this makes it considerably taller than the last outing, the Gel Nimbus 24. Of course, there is a bit of a downside there when you're adding lots of foam. I've got about 355 grams here in my UK size 11, US size 12. So it's about 12.5 ounces if you like that sort of thing. Now, the ASICS specs are quite a bit lower, though I have noted they are in a slightly smaller size than usual. I would assume perhaps ASICS are stating the midsole stack without the insole height, and that's about 4mm, so that kind of adds up. Gotta do your homework, people, gotta do your homework. We'll hit the initial review with the upper first. And what a great looking shoe it is. Look at that. What a beautiful profile. Upper wise, we got that stretchy knit tongue that wraps around the foot and is gusseted either side of the shoe. It's accompanied by a very soft fabric that leads through into the toe box. It really is a lovely, plush, comfortable feeling upper. Gotta be honest, I put it on foot and walked around the house just to see what it was like, and I forgot I was wearing a shoe. That's how good it was. You can believe me or not. Certainly one of the most comfortable running shoe uppers in a long time. Now it is super padded around that ankle area, very plush. There's a considerable firm heel counter as well, and it does creep back quite far up the shoe. I think it stretches forward about 8.5 centimeters from the rear section of the shoe. There is a slight texture to the heel padding. Seems to sort of hold the foot in place, kind of grips onto your sock a little bit. Not so much that it's going to tear away at the sock, but just enough to hold the ankle firmly in place. The tongue here is pretty much exactly what you had on the Nimbus 24. I'm not entirely sure it's that much shorter really than the Nimbus 24, but it does a double job as a really good pull tab, and you've got another one of those here. It's very stretchy here in the back. Gotta be honest, it did actually come in useful this time round. I don't really feel that they're really that necessary. Rather than standard eyelets here, we have a load of lace loops, and they do work a treat, giving you some really good lockdown, and you've got some extra standard eyelets at the top if you do want to do a runner's knot. I found I got away without using one with the shoe, got a decent lockdown just with a standard bow, where the padding actually comes around quite far to the sort of final eyelets of the shoe. I found that it does relieve a lot of the pressure that I found on something like the SC Trainer. I had to tinker around with the lacing to get that one spot on. No troubles here. Got it right first time. I certainly like the profile of the upper on this one. There is a very pronounced curve to that midsole. I will discuss that a little bit more in the moment when I get to the foam. I would suggest you may wish to go a half size up in this shoe due to that very pronounced curve here. I did find myself moving towards the end of the shoe if I didn't have the Actual laces tied up quite tight. I guess you're somewhere between the Nova Blast upper and the last Nimbus 24 really in terms of the actual feel. I'm going to give it a 2.7 out of 3 after my initial run, only reduced by the reliance on that quite considerable padding here in the heel, and it's quite a pronounced weight as well, which I think is probably from the heel counter area. Midsole, midsole, midsole now. So the midsole material here is Flight Foam Blast Plus Eco. Now I believe this has got some sort of sustainable content in it. It does feel very much like the standard Flight Foam Blast Plus material we've had in other ASICS shoes recently. Maybe my feet just aren't as sensitive as they need to be to detect the slight changes there. Yours might be though, depending which socks you're wearing, of course. It's certainly firmer than perhaps you think it is by looking at the images now on the screen. I'm not talking like React in terms of its solidity, but it's certainly no Fuel Cell or Light Strike Pro or Zoom X certainly. Less squash than those shoes, but you've got a slightly more controlled, smooth feel here. ASICS slowly moving away from that quite firm flight foam material that we saw a few years back. There's a nice balance here between squash and that sort of responsive feel that you want from a running shoe. You don't want to feel you're just running in a pillow or something. That's just not going to be very fun and exciting at all, is it? There's no plate here, people, but we do have pure gel. Now, from looking at some of the ASICS marketing material that come with the shoe, it does appear as if that pure gel section is really there as some sort of air unit, like you might find in a Nike shoe in the heel. It's kind of embedded into the rear section of the midsole, just below that sort of strobel board that you get. There's a very thin layer of foam here that rides the top of the midsole unit, and I think the pure gel's just underneath that. I think it does a really good job actually of just creating a slightly more stabilized feel in the heel. If you've perhaps run in some of the other max cushion super shoes recently and they just felt far too unstable, I don't think you'll get that same feeling in the Nimbus 25. Kind of feels weird just calling it the Nimbus 25. I mean, there is some gel there, but it's not in the mid to forefoot section anymore. There's certainly less road feel here though, and if that's something that you like from your running shoe, you probably want to look elsewhere. But I did feel myself using that rocker here from the mid to forefoot. It's quite prominent and it elevates the shoe a little bit above the SC trainer for me. In fact, it feels a little bit more like a Zoom Fly 5 competitor perhaps, when you start to try to run a little faster in the shoe. If you kind of imagine like a nylon plated Zoom Fly 5 without that real rigidity, you've got something in the ballpark there. Yeah, the foam feels something like that Nike shoe actually, without the inconsistency of the SR02 foam or that tore up Zoom X scrap midsole. I didn't like that at all. This is much more palatable. Perhaps ASICS trying to make the gel formula that little bit lighter so they can reduce the actual weight of some of their new shoes. In use, the shoe is very smooth, and I think for application purposes, probably one for steady miles. It's not one I'd opt to use for some faster sessions, but I don't really think ASICS are aiming it at that at all. A cruiser for the slower type sessions for me, around about that 8 minutes per mile or 5 minutes per kilometre. I think mainly due to that more plush and weighty feel. Nowhere near as rigid as that Zoom Fly 5 though, so if that shoe didn't work for you, don't worry too much. Probably somewhere between that shoe and maybe the Boston 10 or 11. Just feels a lot more cushioned underfoot though than the Boston. I guess it depends very much on what you want from a sort of easy or recovery shoe. Many people like the cushion that's offered by something like the Invincible run. Others find it far too squashy. I love the forgiving qualities of that shoe, though I just wished it would be a little bit lighter. I feel that this shoe perhaps is aimed at people that want that nice controlled landing platform. Maybe for those heavier built runners that want that more consistent ride without the rigid sort of feel that's offered by plated shoes. Though do be aware of that very rocker design here. It's not going to be for everybody. If you like that feeling of placing your foot down on the stair and pushing forward and falling, that's kind of what it's like. I gotta say though, I'm really impressed by the midsole here. It has the right balance. I think for training shoes, that's what the midsole should be about. You need a good balance between stability and cushion. Imagine the Death Star trench run though. I feel like I'm barely impacting the surface here of the midsole. I'm a very slightly built guy, very low weight.
Benefit more from the stack, others will. Yes.
I'll give it a 2.8 out of 3 for the midsole though, after my initial run. Outsole now. Once again, this ASICS high abrasion rubber stuff, it's going to be here long after we're gone. We have the high abrasion plus stuff in the rear, which is a little bit tougher, and the slightly smoother, stickier AHA light in the forefoot. Now I would assume that the majority of wear comes in that lateral heel for me and almost the rest of the universe of runners. Thus it makes sense to have that more durable ASICS high abrasion plus stuff in the rear here. You know, to the touch, the rubbers do feel a little bit different, slightly more malleable, I suppose, in the forefoot. Yeah, and this feels a bit tougher here in the rear. Got to get the fingers out there, you got to have a good feel. Yep, definitely a bit tougher there, a little smoother there in the forefoot, very soft. The depth of the rubber here is relatively consistent across the outsole, though I do worry that these small holes here will house a few stowaways. It's going to pick up some small rocks and stones. It's just going to happen sooner or later. I think the rubber's got a little bit of a hand in actually creating that rockered feel here. If you only had a very small, thin application of the rubber, it wouldn't quite have the same propulsive feel on toe off. Those stinking wet and windy conditions out there today, traction was actually very, very good. You know, I'm not talking sticky rubber ASICS Metaspeed Sky Plus sort of traction, but it was good, very reasonable on the concrete paths. Probably it was most at home on the tarmac roads. Very impressed with the grip on the wet surfaces so far. Of course, I can't really see too many people running in this type of shoe on grass. It's just not engineered to do that. Gotta be honest, give it a strong 2.7 out of 3 after my initial runs for the outsole. Like I said, this rubber's so good it will outlast us all. Foams will surely compress before ASICS high abrasion rubber wears out. Value now. Just thinking about value here and the retail price of this one when it does drop at the start of April. You got something like the Energy X around about 145, the Zoomfly 5 around about 150, and then the Invincible run at about 155. There comes the Gel Nimbus 25 at 175, the Super Blast above that 210, and the SC Trainer around about the same. Haven't had a chance to try the Super Blast yet, but the SC Trainer, well, this thing kind of beats it hands down. I mean, the Reebok shoe's good. It doesn't seem to have that same sort of propulsive feel as this one does. I think it's probably going to be a competitor to the Invincible run from Nike. It's just a slightly more conservative ride when you've got all-out squash in the Zoom X shoe. Certainly I'm impressed with the quality of this shoe out the box. There's been some real stinkers from a few other manufacturers recently. This one just feels like a really nice quality, well put together running shoe. Smells pretty good as well. It's got the edge over something like the 1080 V11 from New Balance and that SC Trainer. Disappointed in that one a little bit. And this more mid to forefoot rocker here than Brian Setzer himself. ASICS say they've put 18 months of development into this shoe, and it certainly does feel like it's actually benefited from that. It's a high quality competitor to some of the other cookie cutter offerings that we've had recently. As such, in terms of build quality and fit for purpose, some good old competition for the Nike Zoom X Invincible run too. Certainly more stable than Nike's offering, and that might be an important aspect for you. So don't expect crazy squash. This one's a lot more conservative, but still very forgiving. I'll give it a 2.6 out of 3 for value after my initial runs. If I've added up the scores correctly, a very strong 10.8 out of 12 for the Gel Nimbus 25 from ASICS. This one drops very early February. If you've got any more questions about the shoe, drop me a comment down below. Musical interlude time for you. I really like checking out B-sides that were released around the release of sort of big albums. There's a whole great selection of good B-sides when Radiohead released OK Computer. I think they pulled them all together on a reissue of the album a few years back, and they sound absolutely fantastic now. Meeting in the Aisle is worth checking out. It's got this weird drum machine backing and these swirling, echoing melodies. Polyethylene parts 1 and 2 are fantastic as well. Rip-roaring guitars on that one. The track How I Made My Millions as well sends shivers up my spine. It kind of sounds like it could have been on Neil Young's After the Gold Rush album, recorded on like a cassette recorder or something. It does sound fantastic. You can imagine Tom York being the last person on earth sort of playing this tune in this sort of apocalyptic sort of world. How I Made My Millions. What a great track. So many good Radiohead songs, guys. B-sides even better. Go and check it out. B-sides from OK Computer. Thanks for tuning in, people. Hope you enjoyed today's review. I will have some more videos coming out featuring the Gel Nimbus 25. If you want a few morsels and crumbs of information, they will be coming. Hit that subscribe button. Click the bell below for notifications. Also give this video a thumbs up, like, and share it with your running buddies. My name is Eddbud, and I'll be seeing you